Hi there, I'm Ian Willoughby, and you're very welcome to episode 8 of Czech Next Wave. It's a podcast series produced by the Czech Centres Network and Radio Prague International that's introducing listeners around the world to some of the most talented young Czechs in various fields of the arts and beyond. This time out, my guest is the successful young novelist Kateřina Tučková. Her powerful novel Gerta, focused on the cruel treatment of ethnic Germans in the immediate aftermath of the war, has just been published in English, while another of her works based on extensive historical research is the Žítková Goddesses, the story of a group of female healers in the White Carpathians. Kateřina Tučková and I discuss those books and a whole lot more in this episode of Czech Next Wave. You went to a well-known grammar school in Brno, the Kapitan Jaroš Grammar School, which was attended in the past by several famous writers, including Karel Čapek, Ivan Blatný, Milan Kundera. Did that in any way shape your attitude to writing or your interest in writing?
I don't think so, because at that time when I attended high school, I didn't think that I could be a writer, because in my circles, nowhere around me was no one who wrote, and I comes from South Moravian village. Then I spent years in the house of my second father in a small town, and I lacked some role models. So I really didn't think to be writer during high school years, but I was very keen reader and I read a lot at that time, and that's why also I went to university for studying Czech literature and Czech language. So it was the connection we can see maybe here, that it was the impulse which I got in high school to focus on the literature and language.
And when did you begin becoming confident as a writer?
Very late. I think in my late university studies, when I had a chance to attend in my university in Brno, in Masaryk University, when I had a chance to attend the classes of Zdeněk Fischer, who was a docent, a teacher there, and he led literature classes of interpretation and also writing. So I tried. And there in these classes, I found out that I can write and that it's not such bad as I thought. He very supported me in my writing way. So thanks to him, probably I was brave enough to send some short stories to newspapers and magazines. And in quite a short time, some of my stories were published. And there was a way to my first book, because first parts of longer text read a publisher from publishing house Host, Tomáš Reichel, and he contacted me, and then the connection was connected, so I started to write for them.
I'd like to ask you about Gerta, your excellent 2009 novel, which has just come out in English, translated by Veronique Verkushny. In your early 20s, you began living in an area of Brno nicknamed Bronx. And I know that somehow living there led you to write this great book, which is about the fate of a half-Czech, half-German Brno woman. How did living in that district of the city result in you writing Gerta?
Until today, I'm very, very thankful to the fate that my steps were led to this district, Brno Bronx, because this is the source of inspiration until today for me. There are still signs of war until today. It's a district which is not beautiful, really not. No one from Brno citizens likes to go there because it's a bit danger. It's dark, still not very good repaired. But that's the atmosphere which I like really much, and which is so inspirational, because on the facades, for example, still are visible bullets from pistols from the occupation time, or there is still a sign where is written Mährische Glas- und Spiegelindustrie. So it's German letters on the facade. And this sign, for example, it's just 200 meters from my flat, from my house. This was also the moment when I went to home and I read this sign, and I asked myself, what's happened here? Why it is here such a sign, and why the buildings are in such a terrible condition, or what happened here? Then I asked people, old neighbors or my friends who studied history. We discussed a lot about the history of this district, and I found out that it has a really, really sad history. It was the place where Germans lived together with Czechs and also with the Jewish community. First, the Jewish community was transferred into camps, then the Germans were expelled, then Czechs moved there to the empty flats, and then another Czech wave came because the first one moved from the stolen flats out. So this district changed. There's people, there's inhabitants many times through the 20th century, and it's really visible that no one cares really about this district. But for me as a writer, it was a real treasure because every stories which happened there are still somehow reachable and visible in the streets.
Gerta and many other characters suffered terribly after the end of the war during the period known as the Wild Expulsions, when numerous atrocities against the Germans were carried out by Czechs. The book specifically details a death march involving around 20,000 German women, children, and old people who were forced out of Brno. I myself was only vaguely aware of this event, and even then only because in recent years there have been some reenactments that I've read about, or events held to honor the victims. And I'm wondering, when you started writing this book, how well known was this death march? Was it commonly known by Czech people?
So as you mentioned, I visited quite a good high school, and we had a really good teacher of history and quite wide education in history and in humanities subject. But still, this topic we didn't discuss until I was in university. I guess I come across this topic. But still, in the 90s in Brno, it was very really taboo topic that there was also Germans who lived and shaped the city. And that's why it was so shocking for me when I moved to this district and I found out that in my street, in my home house, and maybe in my flat lived the German families. And when I found out that a 21 years old girl with her half-year-old baby was one of the victims. She lived in my street. So I felt at that time, when I was almost the same age, I very sympathized with her, because it was such a big punishment for a young girl, from a young mother with a half-year-old baby, that I were really touched by this whole her story. It was because I didn't know about such a tale, such a story of Germans, of Brno Germans. And when I started to ask, when I started my research, I found out that not many people knows about it, because they wanted to forget if they were from the older generation. And people from younger generation, middle generation, or my generation, they wasn't taught about it. It vanished from the public discussion completely. In the 90s, there were some new connection between Czech and German historians, between intellectual circles and cultural circles. So the discussions started. There were already some secondary literature where was information written about the Brno Death March. That's why I had some sources from which I can draw. But still, it wasn't really easy to get, for example, emotional information. So I was very glad that I had a chance to find two women who were very open to me, and they wanted to talk with me. They were of German roots, but they wasn't expelled. They had a chance to return back to Brno and they stayed there. But for whole their life, they didn't admit to no one that they were Germans, originally Germans. So also for them, it was very hard to start the discussion about their memories and roots and about their families. So I was very glad to be not a friend, but that they were willing to speak with me, and this was the most important source. These two women were the most important source for me because I understood how cruel it was for women and children who were involved into the march. From them, I could understand the emotions and everything what happened in inner life of people who were expelled.
Some of the details in Gerta are absolutely shocking and disgusting and terrible. I wanted to ask you, you studied, as you said, Czech studies, also art history, but it seems to me that your work as a writer has in a way almost turned you into a regular historian, and you've even received an award from the Institute for the Study of Totalitarian Regimes. How much research do you typically do when you begin working on one of your historical novels?
Well, at first I read what is in secondary literature and speak with historians, and I try to find out some shape of the story. And then I usually visit the places, and I tried to find people who were or are involved in the story, which is the most important and also most difficult part, because it's not really easy to convince people to speak about things which were taboo as a Bernadette March, or which are not pleasant for them because it's connected with bad, painful memories. And this all lasts usually for a year or two, and writing lasts. I write during this time, but not regularly. In the first step is more important the research. So usually around 3 years lasts every book, to write every book, to make research and write a book. And now the book which I write in these days, it's a real exception, because I write it for 9th year, which is really a long time. And I still find some new things which were covered and in archives, because it's a really complicated and long story which didn't finish until today. So for this time, with a book called Bílá voda, it's a 9 year already.
Also, say, for example, in the case of Gerta, do you feel a great pressure to have your facts right? Because somebody who has a different political view from you could accuse you of exaggerating or even adding things that were not true?
Definitely, it's very important thing for me to be 100% sure that what I'm writing, what I write, it's based on the truth. Even the goal, what I really want, it's the novel. So I can use a fiction, I can use my imagination, but still, I'm really careful about the facts, and I try to be sure of every single information which I involve into the story. The characters are usually fictional, but the moments of their lives are collected from the fates of different people. So the character of Gerta, for example, there was no real Gerta Schnirch, but still her life is connected from the stories which I collected during my research, and her life easily could be real.
I guess your biggest success to date has been with the book The Žítková Goddesses, which was a massive critical and commercial success and sold over 100,000 copies. It's about a group of women with special powers who live in the White Carpathian mountains, and it follows their fate over many years up to the communist times. To me, it seems like such an unusual subject, kind of mystical. Where did you get the idea for the Žítková Goddesses?
I'm very thankful to my colleague, to the historian David Kovařík, who helped me a lot with the research on the Gerta book, on the book about Gerta. He also went with me 32 kilometers from Brno to the mass grave where people who wasn't able to endure the march were buried for half a century. He told me about the women who lived in White Carpathians and were followed by all regimes who came across Czechoslovakia or Czech Republic, which means by Nazis and by communists. Also that their art of healing lasted centuries. Then finally communists were the power who stopped their work or their helping of people, which attracted me, and I went to White Carpathians to find the story, and it was really fascinating what I found out.
I'm a very skeptical person. I don't believe in many kind of metaphysical things or things beyond the concrete. Would I be able to enjoy the book if I'm skeptical about people having healing powers?
Definitely the main character of Dora Idesova, who is also very skeptical. She is a scientist, she is ethnograph or anthropologist, let's say. She is from the district. She is one of the granddaughter of one of the goddesses, and she is very skeptical. So she tried to explain everything through the anthropological science, through common sense. But still, she had to face some facts which are unexplainable. And then she found out a lot of materials in archives of Nazis or in archives of secret service of communist regime. And there are things which place like a mosaic all together. Something can explain something else, but something still stays unexplainable. And I don't want to really the gist, the end. But even the skeptical people can read this story through Dora's eyes, I think with pleasure, I hope.
You mentioned the book you're working on now, Bílá voda, which I guess would translate as white water, even though Bílá voda is the name of a place on the Czech-Polish border. What's the focus of Bílá voda?
So this is really a hard topic for me. It's the topic of persecution of nuns during communist time. There were internment camp and labor camps where people like monks and nuns from orders were sent in the year 1950 because the communist regime wanted to get rid of any ideological opposition. The Catholic Church was seen as the biggest ideological opposition, so they were sent there don't to be in eyes of public, of people. And this is the starting point of my story, which goes with the main character through such a persecution and also through the circles of underground Catholic Church, which operated here in Czechoslovakia, previous Czechoslovakia, because unfortunately, Czech official Catholic Church was loyal to communist regime, which means that they didn't care about some nuns who were in internment camps, and they had to help themselves to maintain the rules of their order. So it's quite a sad story related to the suffering of nuns and also suffering of Catholics, which last a bit until today because all the causa of underground church and ordaining women to be Catholic priest, for example, which was one of the help which was necessary for the nuns. It's not solved until today.
I get the impression from reading Gerta and also what I know about the Žítková Goddesses and now what you're saying about Bílá voda, that you're very comfortable maybe writing about female communities. Where does that come from?
I'm woman. I have 3 sisters, so I'm used to living in some woman life and in communities. Probably in first books, I didn't exactly know what I want to say. It was very intuitive. My writing was very intuitive. But when I look back and I see Gerta, Goddesses, then my last book is called Heroines. It's for children. It's about 60 women who acted as heroines in our history, in Czech history. I probably understand more to myself because I want to show to women that they deserve a respect and more respect than in Czech society of my childhood and youth, more respect than was given them when I was young. So maybe until today I suffer a bit of unbalanced gender position or female position in Czech society. So I want to help to other women to feel better.
When you go abroad and do readings and interact with readers from different countries, do they have a different or interesting perspective on your work that you wouldn't hear from Czech readers sometimes?
It was different with different books. For example, with Gerta, I had to explain more things which I had to explain here in Czech Republic, and also the reaction were very different because in Czech Republic this topic still cause negative answers, because not everybody are fine with my perspective. The perspective is the perspective of a girl from Czech German, half Czech, half German family, and not every readers want to understand the suffering of half German people. Abroad, it wasn't a problem. In Germany, it was known, the topic was known. There was not necessary to explain things and circumstances like in other countries. But generally, it was understandable, the main point that to expel people, to punish them with losing their home, all their life, disconnect the families or destroy the families, that it's total collapse of their lives. So the main gist was understandable everywhere. What was interesting with the Goddesses is the difference how people understood it in post-totalitarian countries and in West. Because in, let's say, Poland, Hungary, Ukraine, there wasn't necessary to explain the pressure of the communist regime on such people like was the old ladies or old woman from some village, some mountain village who healed people. This is not understandable for Western reader. But what was generally understood was some mysteries, the magic part of the book, and also the women topic was understandable. The fate of women against the big historian events who are more cruel to women, old people, and children than to men.
Katka, when I was preparing for this interview, one thing that really struck me was how busy and active you seem to be. As well as being a novelist, you've also done projects cooperating with theatres, you're also a curator, and you're involved in loads of civic initiatives. And on top of that, you're living in Prague, but also have many activities in Brno. You now have a small child. How do you manage to achieve so much? Do you ever have a second for yourself? Because even for me, talking about this makes me tired.
So I'm sorry, but so thank you. I don't know, until I was 39, I had 3 jobs, and I like it. I enjoyed it very much. I studied Czech literature and Czech language. I wrote. I studied the history of art, and I prepared exhibitions. And these 2 things was very easy to do together because both of these cultural things were. I was like a freelancer. I can do it whenever I wanted, so it was easily to connect it. Traveling is quite demanding because to travel abroad with books for readings and return back, it doesn't mean just a trip, the way there and the way back. I am usually exhausted after it, and it takes me couple of days to get back to writing, for example, to get back to the concentration. But still, it was manageable, and to prepare also some festival and enjoy the social life. But everything was changed last year, not only because of the pandemic, but also because of the birth of my son. And it changed a lot. I can see it now that unfortunately there will be no time for exhibition, for example. I have to choose now from my activities. But never mind, my bigger and wider personal life is very nice. So I enjoy now also to be a mother.
Kateřina Tučková's novel Gerta was published in English at the beginning of February, and I can't recommend it highly enough to anybody who's interested in modern Czech history. Kateřina has been my guest in episode 8 of Czech Next Wave, a podcast produced jointly by the Czech Centres Network and Radio Prague International, where the focus is on young Czechs on the rise in various fields of the arts and beyond. If you've enjoyed this edition, why not check out some of the earlier ones? And of course, do subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. By the way, our theme music is by another talented young Czech, the keyboard whiz Andrej Pivets. From me, Ian Willoughby, thank you very much indeed for listening to Czech Next Wave, and speak to you again very soon.